Good morning, Ms. Smith. How are you today?
I'm great, Ms. Green. How are you?
Good. I'm doing well. Happy Monday. We are here on this wonderful day. So I shared the agenda with you on Friday.
Yes.
So that you can see exactly what we were going to be looking at today. Did you have anything you want to add to the agenda?
No, thank you. It looks
Okay.
good.
All right. Good. So you did have some pre-work for this meeting, and the pre-work I actually wanted you to go ahead and view the Gallup Theme Thursday for deliberative, and then capture some noticing and wanderings while watching the clip, so that we can have some discussion about that, because we've been working on your how to actually leverage your themes and know what your themes look like in the balcony, the basement, and raw mature. So we're going to continue that work until we do all 5 themes, and so we're on deliberate now. So let's look at deliberate. So you had an opportunity to watch it. So think about what you watched and you heard, and just share with me, how does the theme deliberative come across to the staff, students, and community in the balcony, basement, raw, or mature?
So it was different when I was watching it, because some of the things I definitely could connect to, and there were some things I was like, maybe not so much. So the first one in the basement, it said you could be viewed as slow or indecisive.
Oh.
And I definitely know that the staff views me as like on 100 all the time. So that part definitely, I don't think, comes through to the staff. But it has been also shared with me that I'm very private and guarded, which is accurate. In the raw, it says I could be cautious because I scare easily and I notice dangerous things. Mature, I definitely agree with. I am extremely cautious with decisions I make because I care deeply about the children, and I know each decision is going to have an impact on the children. And then in the balcony, it's because I can prevent bad things from happening, because I can foresee things that could happen, and so I take my time and try to hear things through and be a good decision maker.
Good. So based off of the learning that you received around deliberative and that theme, how will you continue to leverage deliberative so that it is functioning in the balcony and the mature, so that it can improve teaching practices, your student learning, build capacity with your assistant principal, and also build those relationships with those external partners, community, and parents?
So I think the biggest takeaway I had was that I'm a very good listener. I spend a lot of time, it looks like I'm not engaged, but I'm actually just observing and listening and taking notes. So I'm going to continue to do informal observations and meetings with my assistant principal especially, and actually listen to the things that they need to work on, and then help them create an action plan so that they are successful. I guess just through observation is where I'm going to get the most of my data from. So I'm going to make sure everything is evidence-based, and I'm going to continue to build upon their strengths so that they're not feeling defeated, but also using data to make sure that the teachers understand that every choice they make impacts the students.
What about your parents and community?
Parents and community engagement is actually going very well. We started a new thing on Fridays called First Fridays, where I have meetings with the community so I can actually hear what their concerns are, so that I can address concerns before they feel like no one's listening. So I feel like an informal meeting to allow the parents and community to come in to share celebrations as well as things we need to work on has definitely improved, just by me being a listener and then taking it and going from there.
Now, was that a deliberative move? Why did you move to First Fridays?
I moved to First Fridays because I felt like the PTA wasn't necessarily the forum for parents and community to share concerns or ideas that they had, so I wanted to give them a platform. So in listening to some of the people saying that they can't always get to PTA, I needed to find a different venue for them to be able to come in. So I listened and I acted upon what I thought was best for the community.
Okay, good. So let's continue to move forward and look at our objectives. So our objective for today is Ms. Smith and Ms. Green will use the selfie protocol to analyze Ms. Smith providing feedback using the 6 steps to effective feedback, with a focus on questions and action step, in order to identify a problem of practice. Because I know that we actually looked at this in February. You did your first selfie protocol, and at that time when you did it actually with one of your colleagues.
Yes.
At the cluster meeting. So I went back and I looked at some of that information so that we can have a focus for today. And the focus was around questions, asking those probing questions. So we're going to continue that work. And then we had some action steps from the mid-year, and we had some action steps from the actual learning walk that occurred. So let's click on the mid-year action steps, and let's look at that to see how we're progressing in those action steps, and if you need any additional support with that. So if we scroll to the bottom of the mid-year, and there was some action steps 1 around standard 1. When we looked at collaborative planning, of just making sure that we plan and maintain those structures for collaborative planning, and that we implement them to address the following. What do we want students to learn? What is the evidence that will be used to determine if students learned it? How do we respond when students don't learn it? And how do we respond when students learn it? And then monitor collaborative planning to provide effective feedback. So how do you think you're progressing in that standard, and what's your evidence?
My evidence, I'm progressing nicely. My evidence is I have been an active participant in all grade level and all content areas for collaborative planning since our last meeting. I decided, of course, that what gets monitored gets done. So I provide feedback at the end of every collaborative planning agenda and next steps, and I follow up over the weekend to make sure that everything's put into place.
So based off of the feedback that you've been providing, reflect on some of the feedback that you've been providing to your staff. What do you need to adjust with collaborative planning?
Given the feedback, I talk a lot about data, and I still feel that teachers need to grow in their capacity in order to use that data to guide their instruction. They have the data, but then they're not looking at that data when they're lesson designing for next week. So we're starting to look at student work, and then we're going to build a common assessment. Then the next collaborative planning session, they're going to bring that assessment piece in. We're going to talk about what they did. We're going to look at the student work and the different practices that they put into place, and as a result of that, we've actually changed up some of our grouping for students, especially in the primary reading classes. We determined that we have a few of the outliers who are on levels 28 and above, whereas some classes have children who are on level 4. So in order to meet those needs in collaborative planning, we design which teacher is going to teach which group. So especially for our newer teachers, it really helps and gives them the confidence that they need to move forward based on the data.
Okay, good. And standard 3, we talked about an action step around playing a goal each week, because the last time we talked, we know that you're very ambitious and you want to go to all the classrooms every week, but the challenge really was that you wanted to make sure you provide that face-to-face feedback. So one of the action steps we said is to plan a goal each week to determine the number of formals that we completed with providing face-to-face feedback. Again, narrowing the focus of identifying the purpose for the feedback, given specific probing questions and action steps, and monitor instructions using multiple data sources. So let's talk about that. Reflect on your work. What goal did you set for yourself for each week?
So for each week with the 6 steps of effective feedback, I've done 2.
Okay.
I meet with I observe the teacher Monday, then we meet Tuesday. I observe a teacher Wednesday, we meet Thursday. My goal for this upcoming week is to do 3. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. At first it was very uncomfortable, but the more you do it, the more effective that you see it becomes. So it becomes a quicker process because it's not so painstaking for me to sit down and think, okay, what's this step, what's this step? It starts to have a logical flow to it. So my goal for this upcoming week is to do 3.
Good. What about identifying the purpose for the face-to-face feedback by developing those questions, those probing questions, so that it can help you get to the right action step? So what have you done in that action step?
I've actually started writing out where I thought the questions should go and where I thought the teacher's frame of thinking should go. And at first, the first one was quite painful. We were on completely different pages, so I had to backdraft and realize that I didn't ask the right probing questions. So I kind of go through it with myself after I do the observation. And I also have started inviting my leadership team in to say, if you were in this position, what kind of responses do you feel you would give me? So it helps me definitely to stay focused. But I did find it makes my conferences a lot shorter in duration too, because everything's just kind of going as planned.
Good, because that feedback shouldn't be any more than if you pace yourself well according to some of the time allotments, maybe 15 to 20 minutes, exactly. Because if you start to go long and prolong it, it really doesn't narrow the focus. It's just making everything bigger. How have you used the invitational inquiry stems or the learning focus supervision stems that were provided so that help you to develop those questions? Have you had opportunity to use those yet?
I have not, but I'll make that a goal for this week.
Okay. And we're going to look at that today.
Okay.
After looking at your feedback, we're going to look at that today. The next one we have here is on standard 6, right? Yeah, standard 6. And that is basically, again, that we're going to communicate with Ms. Kachowski, because when we sat down, we actually looked at the data, and the data was showing us some disparities between your ESOL students and the other student groups. And so we wanted to reach out to her to identify structures, systems, and resources for those students. And then here it says Ms. Smith will leverage the balcony of the deliberative theme. So that's why we looked at that closer today, because you're going to really use that theme to support the assistant principal, teachers' capacity by maximizing job embedded opportunities and provide professional learning based on their needs. So let's talk about those two goals. How have you progressed in those goals, and provide evidence to support it?
So my first goal, I met with Ms. Kokonowski last week. I met with her and my ESOL ILT. We talked about our data. We talked about the Dodge Park model, and then we also ended up going into the Templeton model, because we discovered that our newcomer level is much higher than Dodge Park, so Dr. Kokonowski doesn't believe that it's going to be a definite fit. So we pulled out all the data. I pulled in my ESOL ILT. We definitely discussed the fact that their workload is extremely high. So when it came time doing the budget, we increased our number of full-time ESOL teachers so that it was adequate and appropriate to meet the needs. Our ESOL enrollment continues to grow each and every day. I think we've had 80 new enrollees since the beginning of the year, and 60 of them have received ESOL services. So we're going to go to 4 full-time, and we're going to cut out the ESOL ILT, because even though the ESOL ILT has a lot to give to the staff, she's pulling in many different directions. So we're going to rely on collaboration next work between the ESOL team. So instead of having one ILT, each of them will take turns presenting different professional development to the staff.
Good.
The second one is we just did a MAP-R training to build their capacity on assessment literacy.
Yes, I was on the rolling agenda last week.
Ms. Stewart, and that was phenomenal. We are going to then turnkey it to the staff on Wednesday. Each person on my leadership team, as well as my assistant principal, has a specific area that they're going to focus on and cover. So it's a chance and an opportunity for them to not only build their capacity, but then also turnkey it to the staff. Our new focus for staff meetings is that each staff meeting that we have, a leadership team member or the assistant principal is going to spend 15 minutes going over best instructional practices and strategies that the teachers can use, so that we make sure that everyone's being seen as an active instructional leader in the school.
Good. So I commend you on actually looking at those goals and keeping them in front of you as a focus and meeting those goals. And so these goals that we set here and these action steps during the mid-year are things that we used from our discussion based off of the dialogue we had, the data of what needs to take place at Gladys New to continue to move teaching practices and student achievement. So congratulations. And so we actually have one more if we go back to our rolling agenda, the action step, and then this is an ongoing action step, because one thing that we also learned is that we have to monitor how the students are doing, set those targets, and continue to monitor that each month so that we know that the students are moving in their levels. And so this one was around DRA and running records, that we will do progress monitoring with the students in February for DRA, March and April running records, and May DRA. And so let's just talk about March, where you are with March now with your progress monitoring.
So we just actually switched over from just a general running records informal sheet to an individualized student action plan basically for each child. So each child's sheet is going to have their DRA, but it's also going to focus in on those emerging behaviors and different strategies they should be using during guided reading, because I feel like we give the DRA, they get a Lexile, a level, and then that's pretty much it until the next time. So we really had to build our leadership team's capacity on what it means to actually monitor that student growth, because we know they're here, we know they have to get to here, but what are we doing in between? And a lot of the teachers weren't able or confident enough to share how they're actually monitoring. So each individual child in grades K through 2 has a sheet. It has their DRA level, it has their next expected benchmark level, their ending level to be on grade level, and then the individual centers and strategies that you're going to use every single day in reading. And then on our last collaborative planning session of the week, which is Thursdays, we meet to see, do they need to change groups? Are we using the right instructional levels? I've involved my reading specialist even more, as well as my ILT, because I feel like we have to build the capacity of the whole entire primary, because again, I can't say progress monitoring has been something that they've been doing consistently. So we're really starting it at ground zero, but they've been given the sheets, they've been given the profile sheets, they've filled out the information. They now understand, like, oh, they're on level 4, they have to get to level 10. But then it's them reflecting on what is it that I can do as a teacher to make sure the children are getting there. And then also, what can we send home for parents at home to work? So it has a parent component on it as well, too.
Good.
So while I feel like we definitely have lots more work to do in that area, I feel like now they're at least cognizant of the fact that you have to monitor in between DRAs, and you have to monitor in between when you're doing the running records, what are you using that data for?
Good.
So now it's making that data purposeful and meaningful.
Good. And during the video that I watched when you were giving the feedback, I saw some evidence of that occurring and some learning occurring for some next steps for the teacher. So we'll go into that. Well, good. Well, how do you feel about meeting your goals? What made you so successful?
I think because gave me a plan to keep me focused. You said, here's what you need to do. Now, kind of take it and run with it. So I had the ability to make it my own, but I knew what my end goal was. So I had to monitor my own progress and say, look, this is where I have to be. This is where my teachers need to be. What steps do I need to do? So by keeping our rolling agenda in place and me always referring back to it helps keep me on my end goal.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Good. And during the time of our conversation, you talked about how you've been planning, how you've been implementing, monitoring, supporting, and communicating. So really leveraging all of those leadership behaviors, and then the practices are basically those things that I'm doing to do those things. So very good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let's look at our plus deltas from last time. So we had what worked well, collaboration, push thinking, great conversation, feedback, suggestions, and we had no deltas. All right, so let's continue to move forward into our objective here. All right. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to use the selfie protocol to look at your coaching that you provided and the feedback and action step with the teacher. But I wanted to go back to reflect around February 23rd, which was almost a month ago, when you did your first selfie protocol at the cluster meeting. So think about that selfie protocol that you did at the cluster meeting. And then you stated that, what was your problem of practice at that time?
As a principal, I don't always narrow my focus or plan questions to specifically focus in on what I want to see improve quickly.
Okay, so you had already identified, wait a minute, the focus is too big. I need to bring it back in. And I also recall you saying that the time that you spend. Go ahead, talk about that.
I realized that I'm very, very much north-minded, and so I sometimes either just get in and the conversation is all one-sided, like, here's the data, here's what I think you should do, or then there's other times where I said, okay, I need to be deliberative and I need to listen to the person, but then I find sometimes that the people can go on and on and on, and then about 25 minutes in, I'm like, okay, what was our focus again? So I really had to find that balance between me making sure I didn't come off as being rushed, and then also the balance of allowing the teachers to share what their focus was. Even if it wasn't necessarily aligned with mine, I tried to find a way to combine it. And then the other piece was I might have overthought some of the action steps and provided teachers with too much, and so they became overwhelmed. So I realized that while I narrowed down my focus and pre-planned questions, I also had to narrow down in on just one or two quick steps that they could fix within a very short amount of time.
Good. So you did your reflection.
Oh, yes.
So let's see how that aligns with the feedback that I've been providing you as well. So based off of, the feedback that I've provided you, summarize some of the things that I have said about your leadership behaviors when it comes to, let's just keep it in the context of providing feedback to your staff. Okay.
You told me not to overwhelm the teachers, to make sure everything was doable, and sometimes you said that what's doable to me might not be doable to the average, especially new teachers, so to keep that in mind. You also said to make sure that my action steps were deliberate and would have a direct impact on student achievement. So whereas long-term planning might not have that direct impact, you wanted me to focus more in on specific assessment data and allow them the opportunity to fix it within 3 or 5 days and for me to go back in. You also reminded me that I need to stay focused in my conversation, so that will allow the teachers to be guided down the right path, but also to allow them the opportunity to share and for me to reflect on what they're sharing to make sure my action steps align with what the outcome was.
Good. So we're in alignment with the work that he's before. So we're going to watch the video together. I think it's like 6 minutes or something like that. So we'll watch it together. But before we actually watch the video, what goal do you want to establish today for watching the video? Do you want to continue the same goal around narrowing the focus and probing questions, or you want something new today?
I think just to receive confirmation that I am on the right track, I would like to keep the same goal.
Okay, good. So we'll keep the same goal. So why don't you go ahead and click on the video. Oh, yep. And while you're watching the video, I want you to be focusing on some of the noticings and wondering. Oh. Okay, so let me go back here. Give me 1 second. You have you need a pen, a bigger paper. You good? Okay. So I'm gonna.
Today to provide your feedback from our observation that took place today. I love the teacher classroom. So last week, Ms. Green, we set a goal on monitoring student behavior, managing student behavior during their small group instruction, because last week there was about 13 times of interruption. So this week, when I without interrupting your class. So tell me how it feels that you're able to actually sit down with the group and not be interrupted now.
Well, it feels free because it allows me to work with my small groups as well as allow the kids to independently go to their centers. I've put in place an academic integrated center in which the children have free choice. So they can go to their centers. I have 2 students per center, so they kind of cut down on the noise level as well while they work.
Good job. I'm very proud of you. So today when I come in, you were working back here with your level 1 and 2. As we know, in order to successfully exit out of kindergarten, we want our children to be on a DRA level of 4 to 8. The specific group you had back here was working on a level 1 to 2. What was your objective or goal for this group that you had today?
My objective is for the kids to be able to read when they're reading with the one-word correspondence, and also their sound when they see a word to try to do the sound of the first letter of the word and the last, the sounds together so that they can read the word.
Good. And I also noticed that during your lesson today, you were taking notes on monitoring the reading behaviors and skills on an observation sheet. What's the purpose for you taking notes during their reading?
The purpose for taking notes when they're reading so that I can see the students, their skills, their strong points, and their weak areas, and the areas that I see that they need more help in, then I can instruct my lessons when I create the lesson plan. I'll put in those type of skills and strategies to teach them so that they can become better readers.
Okay. So can you pull out the monitoring tool that you used today?
I use the guided reading observation note here. So when I do, I'll have the kids read the book, but then I also will monitor them. I'll take notes on like 2 or 3 pages that they're reading.
Okay. So my wondering to you, Ms. Green, would be how would you know what book, if we went back to review this and use this data to plan instruction, how would you know what type of genre the book was, or how would you know what specific book this was in general that they used?
What I do, I write the name of the book and I write the level of the book that they're reading. The genre is in the back of the book, but I don't put anything down for that. But I do put down the book title.
So how often do you use this?
I use this every time that I meet my students for small group guidance.
Okay, so can you explain to me what you have noticed? What can you tell me 3 specific behaviors about Ashley?
Ashley, here when I put the checks here, it means that she read the word correctly. The dash, she didn't read the word correctly. Also right here I have first letter sound. She sounded out sun where she was reading. And I also will put like one to one. And I'm noticing that I'm observing that the student is reading 1-to-1 correspondence.
Great. So if I asked you to identify for me on this sheet whether or not a children was able to match spoken word to written word, would that be something you'd be able to do based on this sheet?
No.
Do you think that would be something that you would want to know when you were planning your small groups?
Yes, definitely.
And I agree with you 100%. So I do appreciate the fact that you actually have started, because I know school-wide we had some concerns, but I'm very, very proud of the fact that you're actually using the observation. And I think that I just would like you to be able to take it up another level, because I see how you are using your data to guide your instruction. So based upon what we talked about, what I think I would like to start implementing for you, especially for your levels 1 and 2, is called a small group instructional profile sheet. And some of the things we would want to look for this group, because they still have a long way to go to make sure they're getting to that level 4 to 8 and kindergarten on grade level. We want to know where are their areas of strengths and where are their areas of weakness that we would like to focus on. So we're going to look at, do they read high frequency words automatically? Do they recognize that the pictures help to explain the text? And the only way you're going to know that is through communication with the children.
Yes.
This sheet here, you're going to put the students' names. You're going to be able to self-correct if they can self-correct, and then you're going to make your notes or next steps.
Okay.
Where do you think you'd be able to use the information that we can find on notes and next steps in your instructional piece?
Information with the centers, in which again I have my centers are academic integrated. For example, I have I can show you one of this right here. I know with letter I and the sound of the alphabet, I work with the kids on this, in which they'll use these, and then they'll match the alphabet with this. So it allows them to identify the upper and lowercase letter, and I also go over them with the sounds of each letter.
Perfect. And so by using this sheet, you'll be able to justify why or who is using that one for each of your centers.
Exactly.
So I think you're going to be able to get more out of this. I don't think you're going to find it as time consuming as this one, and you're also going to be able to tie all
Good. So let's look at this. So I saw you taking notes over there. We're going to go right into the selfie protocol, so you can go click in there. You're ready, huh? You're like all reflective.
I don't know about
Keep
that.
going. So you see here that we actually have our goal. You said, did I narrow the focus and ask probing questions to develop a collaborative action step? Okay, so that's what we're looking for today. One thing that I did do viewing the video, I try to capture your questions that you asked during that time, and then the actual action step during that time. So you can use that as a part of going back. So let's just talk about some of your noticings before your wanderings for your probing question and action step. What did you notice about your probing questions?
I noticed that they were all focused on around progress monitoring for the children during guided reading. So I tried to keep everything within context so that it didn't allow the conversation to drift from where I was trying to keep her focus for what our action steps would be.
Okay. All right. Any specific, so staying low on the ladder of inference, any specific and descriptive questions that you jotted down that you want to put down for your noticing?
I asked her, what is the purpose of you taking notes during reading? Because I wanted her to be able to see, I wanted to make sure we were on the same
So
path.
hold up, let's just do stay low on the ladder of inference.
Okay.
You can bring in context in a little bit.
Okay.
So let's just be specific and descriptive, stay low. So
How
what is
often
the
do you use-
purpose?
What is the purpose of taking notes during guided reading?
What is the purpose of taking notes during guided reading? Okay.
How often do you use your monitoring tool?
Use your monitoring tool. Uh-huh.
What 3 reading behaviors did you notice about a specific child?
Okay, and that child, it was Ashley,
Ashley,
correct?
yes.
Okay, all right, good. Uh-huh.
And then I said, how does the monitoring tool you currently use assist you with monitoring overall progress of reading behaviors?
Okay. Any noticings about the action step?
I'm trying to stay low. I gave her a pre-made sheet for her to use.
Okay.
I narrowed her focus. Instead of doing it on all 3 of her different reading groups, I narrowed it just to her focusing in on her level 1s and level 2s. I gave her a specific date. Well, I asked her when she felt she would be ready. She said she'd be ready tomorrow. Then I gave her a specific date for this upcoming week of when I would come in to provide feedback on her implementing the tool on March 28th.
Now think about that actual action step when you gave it to her. Reflect on that. Do you recall the words that you used when you said the action step?
No, I don't recall.
You can look at the script if you want to, that I wrote up there. So it would be right in this point. That would be the language. And I'll just copy and paste it.
Okay, so I said to her, what I think I would like for you to implement in small group reading is this instructional student profile sheet.
Okay, all right. So now let's go to the wandering sides. Any wanderings you have for your probing questions and action step?
I wonder if I asked her too many questions.
Okay. Okay, anything else?
Nothing to say.
Okay. And what about the action step?
I wonder if I jumped into it without sharing with her. I wonder if I should have given her a completed copy to look at that another teacher had done so she could see the comparison between what I'm asking her to do and how it'll benefit the children as opposed to what she's using that's kind of broad.
Okay. Good. All right. Now let's go down to step 3, where we're going to focus on what was the evidence and why it is important. And so we talked a little bit about this already. And if we just look at the probing questions, what was the evidence that you really captured? You captured what evidence to support your noticings?
I captured the questions that I asked her that led her to reflect on what the purpose of monitoring progress during guided reading was. I asked her to reflect on specific children to get an understanding of what kind of information she was actually getting from the sheet. I asked her to relate it to how she uses that data in her planning, and I asked her to reflect to see how that the sheet that she's currently using actually lets her know if the children are on the right track to meeting that benchmark.
So you said that you actually asked questions that were focused. So they were focused on progress monitoring. So based on what you observed on your informal, this was some of the things that you saw, but this is some of the things that needed to move forward.
Yes.
So you had a focus on, and I want to keep emphasizing that word focus because that was one of that is actually the goal, to see if we had narrowed the focus when we were actually doing the feedback. So you had a focus this time. So not only did you say that, so why is that important?
Because it keeps the conversation focused, for lack of a better word, on the specific area that we want to improve upon for student achievement. Because there was a lot of different areas we could have went to.
Now think about, they'll reflect what you just said. So because it keeps the conversation focused on the specific area we want to improve for student achievement. So recall, who's your learner? Teachers. So when you impact teachers, they impact the students. So think about why it's important again.
So it keeps the conversation focused on her instructional practices that she uses during guided reading to ensure that we have student achievement.
Okay, good. Now let's look at the evidence for the action step. So here, if we go back to the noticing, so the action step, you said, I gave her a template to use. I asked her when she would be ready, gave her a specific date. I said, what I think I would like to implement for you is the small group instructional profile sheet. So recall your noticings and wanderings and identify the evidence that is important to your established goal. So your established goal, did I narrow the focus and ask probing questions to develop a collaborative action step?
So it wasn't collaborative in the fact that she helped to...
So talk about the evidence, because you wanted to say it wasn't collaborative, but what's your evidence to support it wasn't collaborative?
The evidence is that I handed her...
I love it. I handed her the sheet and
told her to implement it.
And told her to implement it. It's okay. It's already gathered here. So the evidence was I handed her the sheet and I told her to implement it.
Yes,
now,
there was no collaboration.
What's the importance of this? So let's talk about it. Go ahead.
The importance is there was no collaboration.
Okay.
The positive is, though, it's a good sheet that she wanted to use. I just didn't allow her to come to that conclusion that it would be a better sheet. I should have asked more questions on, based upon the sheet that you're using now, let's come up with a template together that will allow you to capture more data in the guided reading.
Because she provided evidence of what she was doing.
She did.
And so when we look at that, we reflect on some of those, habits of mind around protocols. So perhaps maybe considering that when she had that sheet, just like you said, what is working well with this sheet? How can we adjust it? And it could be adjusted based off of what you wanted to integrate so that you could come up with a collaborative effort. Yes. Okay? All right, it's all good. So if we move down to step 4, now this is when you actually bring in the context. So you started to bring in some earlier in step 1 when we were trying to stay low on the ladder of inference. So when you look at the evidence, we said, I'm just going to copy and paste this right in the box. So we look at the evidence and why it's important. Now let's talk about the contextual information. So the information that you wanted to bring in and also the information that you know about probing questions and feedback. So what's that contextual information that you want to share? I'm just going to put some of this stuff.
Okay, I'm losing my focus. The contextual information I wanted to share about the
Probing questions. So what do you already know about probing questions based off of the information that you have read, the experiences, the professional learning that you have been, participating in? What is the information that you know about probing questions?
It allows whoever's answering the questions time to reflect on their practices. By keeping my probing questions focused, I only was asking her questions specifically about monitoring reading during guided reading, so it allowed her the opportunity to share what tools she had been using, as well as what did she actually use that data for, which is what brought us to the fact that although she's using the sheet, it necessarily wasn't a sheet that was putting us in the mindset of here's my data, here's where I need to go, here's what I need to do next. But then I wonder if I'm stuck on the whole like there was no collaboration piece in the action step. So
it's okay. So let's do one thing at a time. Let's do the probing question first. So go back to the probing question here and click on where it says here, learning focused conversations. Click here so we can practice a little. Okay. So one thing that you say, and that's really reflecting on now, and I already see you moving to action because you're north, and so I want to bring you back down, so we can leverage that deliberative. So one thing I see already is like, okay, what do I need to do so that I can now be collaborative with the action step, but also developing those probing questions to get to the action step. So one thing that we have here are some stems and some questions that you could use so that when you are preparing for your feedback and as you continue to work to have it as a resource for you. So if you looked at this sheet here, there are some questions around activating and engaging, exploring and discovering, and organizing and integrating. Okay, so those are the four reflective areas there that I want you to look at. So one when you're planning, one when you're reflecting. And when you think about it, I want you to look at those questions, and I want you to think about a question you could ask or adjust to get to the focus of the same intended goal that you wanted to reach. So let's take a minute and just look at that question. You already got one? Okay, which question?
What are some of the skills, knowledge students will need to bring to this unit to be successful? I picked that because I feel like her sheet gave some of the skills, but some of the skills that she talked about were not included on that sheet. So I think this question would have brought it full circle for her to say, hey, this sheet's working great, but I think I might need to add or differentiate, which could have then led me into the collaborative discussion about, well, let's create a template together.
Exactly. Yeah. So what do you notice about that question? What is the difference? If you had to compare that question with some of the questions that you ask, and I'll go back to some of the questions that you asked. So let's
this one's much more open-ended. It allows for discussion led not only by me but also by the teacher herself to be able to apply the things that she's reflecting on so that she can actually take ownership of the sheet instead of looking at it like, oh, here's something Smith gave me to do. Now she's like, we created this together because we know that this will benefit my students. So allowing a more open-ended discussion around it isn't necessarily a bad thing, where I think in my mind I was kind of keep my probing questions so narrow that she didn't really have any other option to go to. But so this allows for the exact same discussion, but it's more open and it's more engaging.
And more engaging and inviting her in the conversation. Good. Look at that sheet and pick one more question.
So I think I would pick, given these goals, how you monitor student learning, because we have the goal of a level DRA at the end, and then how do you want to monitor to ensure that the children were getting there? Again, would have brought me right back to the sheet that we could have collaboratively designed.
Good. And you said the questions are more engaging and inviting so that can end in that collaborative effort. How will you use this resource in the future?
Oh, it's going to be right beside me during the conversation.
Right beside the conversation, but I heard you talk about that behavior planning.
Oh yeah, I'll use these stems to help plan my questions so that I can allow for more in-depth conversation rather than just kind of a recall, yes, no type of thing. So when I plan my probing questions, I will use these stems to guide me, to allow the opportunity for the teachers to be more engaged.
Good, good. So now, do you feel okay with probing questions after having practiced it, looking at the resource? Okay, now let's go to action step. So go back to the actual selfie protocol and look at the action step. So you said that your evidence, I handed her the sheet and told her what to do. That's what you said.
Yeah.
You said there was no collaboration. It was a good sheet for her to use, but based on the sheet you are using now, how could she have adjusted that? So click down where it actually says here, effective action step rubric. And at the last cluster meeting, February 23rd, we were introduced to the rubric so we can actually check our action step to see. So think about the action step you gave her, and I'm going to recall it word for word, and it says, what I think I would like to implement, this is Mrs. Smith speaking, what I would like to implement for you is the small group instructional profile sheet. So that's your evidence. So based off of that action step, now let's go through the rubric. Is it specific? Does it refer to something a teacher will be able to do when they walk out of the meeting?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it observable? Will you be able to easily evaluate it?
Yep.
Is it bite-sized? Can a teacher accomplish this?
Yes.
Is it action step directly connected to student learning?
Yes.
Does it address a root cause?
Yes.
Does it positively change multiple areas?
Yes.
Is it necessary to pave the way for other improvement?
Yes.
Is it most effective way to make change happen?
Yes.
Did the teacher write it down?
Yes.
Okay. If you can make a change in a week, the action step isn't small, and can you easily measure it if the teacher has made the change? So you met the criteria for the rubric, but what was the one thing that it was missing?
Collaboration.
Collaboration. And so going back to some of the feedback that I have given you and some of the feedback that you have reflected on yourself, what is the one area that you continue to reflect around?
Collaboration.
Collaboration. And so based off of what you saw today, reflect and think about, what do you need to do differently? What do you need to adjust? What is an opportunity for improvement for you based on what you saw today?
Although I'm narrowing in my probing questions, I need to make sure that they allow for ongoing conversation, collaboration between the teacher and myself, so that we can come up with the action plan instead of me giving her the action plan that I see needs to be implemented. I need to collaborate and communicate with her to get her to come full circle for her to come to the idea on her own, even though it's the idea that I already have in my mind. I want her to take ownership of it. So I just need to engage in more communication, keep it focused on the area, but allow for more discussion, because she eventually would have come around and said, how about we either modify this sheet, or I know that's where the conversation would have gone, but being the North that I am, I skipped that whole entire let's talk about what the sheet should look like, and instead I just said, here's your sheet, implement it.
So being the North and now thinking about deliberative,
it's conflicting, right?
It's conflicting.
But I'm a very good listener.
But you are a very good listener.
But I don't always necessarily allow the opportunity for the teacher to share, for me to listen, because I already have the end goal in mind, but I have to remove myself and allow the teacher to come through my probing questions.
So reflect on our coaching and how I coach and the types of questions that I ask. If you had to assess the amount of time that I talk versus the amount of time that you talk, what would your...
You make me talk all the time.
Okay. Reflect on how much I talk.
20%.
So 80% of the time.
And the video was the opposite. It was me 80% and her 20%. So I need to flip roles and ask questions, but allow her more time to respond. So I need to stay in my lane and just allow her more time, because then it puts the onus on her rather than me giving it to her.
And even research says that when a student, I'm going to go to the students now, when students are in the classroom, they should be engaged 80% of the time. That means the teacher should only be doing her thing for 20%, but the learning and the ownership, responsibility on the student engaging 80% of the time. Same in a conversation, because you are learning, you are gaining, You're going to go back to Gladys Noon. You're going to, decide today what leadership behaviors you need to implement. Think about how you're going to leverage the deliberative theme, and you're going to go do that. And so if that's just a rule of thumb for you when you are actually having those conversations with your teachers, reflect on how much time am I talking versus how much time they are talking. Now, think about what we just said. What will your leadership behaviors look like when you implement your change?
But they'll be deliberative. I have to plan, but I have to plan the questions that will allow them time to reflect and share out theirs. And then I have to act upon what they're reflecting to make sure that through my monitoring, they're seeing the same things that I'm seeing. So I'm going to continue to guide, but I have to allow them, instead of me laying out the path, I have to allow them to walk the path with me. So I have to continue monitoring, but provide time for them when we engage in the conversation to reflect and provide collaborative next steps.
And how will you know when you are successful at doing that?
Through conversation.
Okay, the conversation.
And the final step would be something that we collaborated on. So the evidence would be a collaborative effort. It wouldn't be me handing someone something again and saying, here, do this. I would say the biggest evidence would be through communication with the teachers.
Okay.
And I guess watching more videos of themselves.
So we said the last time that